Welcome to Empowered. I am Elizabeth Naumovski. Credit scores are key in our lives, especially when it comes to purchasing a large asset and applying for a loan. They're also a huge contributor to whether you live in a desirable location or not. And does joint credit impact your credit score? And should you keep your credit separate from your partner? Yes, credit scores are extremely important, and let's find out why. To help us understand credit scores, I'm joined by Elena Jara, who is the Community Engagement Partner at Bromwich Smith. Elena is located in Toronto, Ontario. Elena, welcome to Empowered.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
So let's begin from the very beginning, because everybody talks about credit scores, but a lot of people don't know what it is yet. So what is a credit score and how is it determined?
Well, a credit score is really just a number, and it's determined by a lot of factors, actually. And so to start off with your credit history, it impacts your score, which means how many times have you applied for credit? How is your payment history? Um, Also, have all sorts of things such as what else? How much debt are you carrying on those credit cards? So those are the three main factors. There's other factors too. So every time you apply for credit, it impacts your credit score. Every time you decide that, hey, I need to apply for something, it'll impact your credit score. So that's called a credit inquiry. But also, um, a lot of the times people think, well, I've just arrived to the country, and how is that going to affect my credit score? Well, again, because the credit score is uh, formula is so secret, they really can't tell us exactly how they figure it out. But what we do know for a fact is that it's based on the number of years you've had credit. So, and it's very specific, it's very unique to each consumer in Canada as well as in any other part of the world. So, when we talk about factors, it really is very important to understand that your situation is unique, and therefore your credit score is going to be unique specifically to you in the way you're using credit.
So let's talk about the difference between a credit history and a credit score.
Sure. A credit history basically um, just shows us, it's like a snapshot of where you're at with your credit information. It'll explain your employment history. Also say how long you've lived at the present address that you're at, or it'll also show the previous address if you've lived there less than 2 years. It'll also show all the credit information that you have, whether you have a credit card, a credit loan, sorry, a card loan, a line of credit, any type of credit that you've ever applied for. It'll show the number of times you've been on time, the number of times you've been late. It'll show absolutely everything. So that's your history. While your credit score is just a number based on that information that was gathered. So it's just a formula that they used to create that credit score for you.
So what impacts your credit score?
Well, there's several things that can truly impact your credit score, specifically your payment history. So a lot of people may think, oh, you know what, I only have to make a $10 minimum payment. So I'm just going to wait till next month. It's not going to be a big deal. But the reality is that the creditors have set a minimum payment for you, and they've given you a due date, which means that you need to respect that. And when you don't, it'll show on your file as you were late. So let's say, for example, you were required to pay $10 on the 15th, and you decided that, hey, you know what, I'll only pay $10, but on the 17th of the month. So you're late. Or you paid on the 15th, but you only paid $5. So you're late. So either way, that's going to impact your credit score. The other things that impact your credit score also, it's every time you apply for credit. So a lot of people think, well, I need to have more than one credit card in order to have a good credit score. That's not necessarily so. It's really advised that you have one credit card rather than 10 credit
10?
cards, right? 'Cause you don't want to have that many because you maybe not going to be able to pay those off as you're supposed to. And sometimes people get tempted to use all of those credit cards, right? So you have to be very careful. The other thing too is that every time you So I said payment history. So let's say, for example, you have a credit card. So it's the limit that you use. So it's advisable that the maximum that you use is 30% of the credit that you're given.
Hold that
So
thought, Elena. 30% of credit that you're giving. We will talk more about this when we come back. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Empowered. I am Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's show is all about understanding credit scores. Elena, before we went to the break, we were talking about, you were talking about 30%, if you use 30% of the credit that you have.
right. So we're talking about a debt ratio, really. So when the creditors are looking at your file, if you're using less than 30%, they're going to be happy. So let's round up the numbers. I like to talk about like certain numbers. So for example, you have a credit card of $1,000 credit limit. And if you're only using 30%, that would be about $300. And $300 is absolutely acceptable. So if you start to climb up on that, maybe let's say $500, that's 50%. And if you go up to 700, that's 70%. If you go up to 900, then you're looking at 90%.
Mhm.
And the creditors are only comfortable when you're using less than 30%. And also that the less that so they want you to use your credit card. They also want you to use it wisely, and they want you to make sure that you don't use the whole thing all at once, because then if you can't pay it, then that full amount's going to be outstanding. But if you're only using 30% and you're going to take your time paying that off within maybe 3 months to a year or a year and a half, they're going to be comfortable with that. But the other way, they're not going to be so comfortable. Therefore, your credit score is going to drop.
So 30% is a very crucial number for people to understand. Now, I want to ask you this question because I talked about it in the intro of the show. How does joint credit impact your score?
Well, it really it's a great question because you don't really have joint credit. When you get married, you'll still have your separate credit score, credit history. The only time you have joint credit is when you actually get a credit card that's joint, or you co-sign on a car loan or a mortgage. That's the only time those that credit information is going to be considered joint, and it's going to show independently on each consumer's file. So for example, it'll show that spouse A will show um, ABC credit card. Spouse B, it will show ABC credit card. If they're both making payments on time, it will show that. If you're not making payments on time, it will also reflect that. So it's very important to understand that when you have a joint credit card or any type of joint credit, it will impact your credit score um, based on your payment ability.
So this is going to segue into the next question now. Should you keep your credit separate from your partner? Meaning, I know a lot of women don't have a credit card in their name. They may have a supplementary credit card from their spouse, and say their marriage ends up breaking down. They actually don't have their own credit score. Is this true?
It's true. If they've only ever had one credit card or several credit cards with their spouse, then yes, that's absolutely true. That information will be reflected on each other's credit information. However, each creditor is going to be it's going to react differently. So if you ever want to, so if you're thinking, well, I'm going to get separated or I'm going through a divorce and I'm going to need to, divide my or part ways with from my credit, it the creditors may each creditor will decide differently. So some creditors will say, okay, you know what? As long as you pay everything off, you're going to have to reapply for a new credit card, and we will then review your situation accordingly. Others will say, the debt has the sure we can remove your name, especially if there's no debt on that credit card. So that should be okay. Again, it's important to go back to the actual creditor and figure out exactly what their requirements are so that you can meet them, and then you can apply for credit and start to establish something on your own. Women tend to rely on their partners, but also men tend to rely on their partners. So some people just don't understand what their consumer rights are. So it's important to ask and find out exactly what you need in order to get back on your feet.
One of the things I talked about in the very beginning of the show was that, if you have a good credit score, you actually will end up living in a better location or have a better situation for where you live. So when we come back, we're actually going to talk about that because a lot of people don't understand. They say, no, how can your credit score actually, help navigate where you live? So don't go away. When we come back, Elena will let us know how that happened and the truth behind it all. So 2 minutes. We'll be right back. Bye for now. Welcome back to Empowered. I am Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's show is all about understanding credit scores. Elena, before we went to the break, I was talking about the fact that a lot of people are confused when you say, yes, if you have a better credit score, you actually can end up living in a more desirable area. So could you explain that, please?
Oh, well, so the reality is it's not that you can start living in a desirable area. The reality is that what will you be able to qualify for? And when you're able to qualify for less, therefore you're going to be living in a less desirable area. So what happens is if you have excellent credit, then the creditors are going to be more than happy to give you that mortgage that you're looking for and at a better interest rate. However, if your credit score isn't very good, then the creditors are going to hold out on giving you the credit that you want, and therefore you're going to have to settle for something that's less than what you were hoping to get.
What about those individuals that want to start their own business? How does your credit score affect your ability to obtain a business loan?
It's almost the same thing, really. I mean, when you're starting with your business, there's two things that the creditors are looking for. Aside from your credit score, they're looking at your business plan. They're also looking at the fact that, hey, are you starting to make money in order to pay off that loan? But if your credit score isn't very good, then you're not going to qualify for a better interest rate. As a matter of fact, what's going to happen is that you're going to be charged a higher interest rate, and therefore that's going to be a bigger burden, a bigger financial burden for that person who's starting the business. So it's very important to understand that before you decide to start that business, you really should do your homework, and that means that check your credit rating, check your credit score, check your credit history, and make sure you understand what's going on with it. Because at the end of the day, when you're applying for that loan, that's going to have a huge impact on how much interest you're going to be paying and if you're going to qualify or not.
So you were saying check your credit score, but does checking my own credit report damage my credit score?
Not necessarily. Normally, when you check your own credit score, it could be directly at through Equifax, through TransUnion. It will not affect your credit score. If you have someone check it for you because you say, well, I don't have time, or maybe my friend works at a bank and they could do me that favor, don't do that because that will affect your credit score because it looks like you're applying for credit.
Interesting. So do creditors want to hear from you even though you're late with your payments?
I believe so. I mean, based on my experience, most of the creditors, you know, continue to call you, and the reason that they're calling is because at the beginning, if you're 1 or 2 months late, they'll probably send you a text, they'll send you an email, they'll call you, and they really want to hear and understand what's going on, and they want to work a repayment plan with you. But the longer you guess you hide or you decide that you're not ready to deal with it, the worse the situation gets. And when that happens, the creditors are tend to say, well, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'm not willing to work on a repayment plan with you anymore. And at that point, that's when you really are going to have to think about what's my other option. And that option should definitely be considering to speak to a licensed insolvency trustee, just because you want to make sure you get the full information and assessment as to what are your options, what do you need to do, and how do you need to follow through. Once you understand that, then you're going to feel so relieved because you're going to be able to deal with this financial situation in a more educated and organized way.
So, just tagging on to the financial situation, what steps do people need to take in order to rebuild their credit score?
There's a couple of things that people need to do. So, let's say, for example, if you decide that, hey, I can manage my debts, then that's great. Start creating a repayment plan that you can follow on your own. And if you're really organized and committed, then you'll be able to liquidate that debt within that time. And that will show your creditors that you're making all the effort. Plus, you'll get back on track and your credit score will start rebuild within time. If you're not able to do that, then the next step would be to figure out whether you're going to do a consumer proposal or maybe bankruptcy. But even if you just decide to do any of the above, you can start to rebuild your credit. And the way you do it is with a secure credit card. So if you've had that financial setback, don't think that you'll never be able to get credit again because that's not true. You will be able to get credit, and there are so many banks out there that will want to work with you. So don't hesitate. I would just say, ask as many questions. And again, that's what we're here for. We're happy to help and provide you as much information as possible.
So, when we come back, we're going to talk about the warning signs that your credit situation is becoming overwhelming. And Elena will have some few tips for us to help us get over that period. Welcome back to Empowered. I am Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's show is all about understanding credit scores, and I'm joined by Elena Jara, who's the community engagement partner at Bromwich Smith. So, Elena, just before we went to break, what are the warning signs that your credit situation is becoming overwhelming and you need help?
Well, I'm going to just tell you a couple of them. The first one that comes to mind is you're avoiding any type of contact with those bills. So you're not opening your invoices or bills at any
The
time.
ostrich, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're hiding as much as possible. You're not paying your bills on time. You're avoiding the conversation about your debts. And the other one that really sticks or comes to mind is the fact that a lot of people just start to argue with their partners when it comes to their financial situation. And that's something that needs to that not only are you avoiding the situation, but you're also fighting and you're in denial about it.
Mm-hmm. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, please continue.
Yeah, so I think that when you start to realize that those are the warning signs and you're actually going through that on a day-to-day basis because you're avoiding the situation, then this is where you really want to start looking at, well, what can I do to help myself? How do I get help? And what's my next step? And a lot of people once they start to do that, I think they're going to feel so much better about their financial situation because they're actually taking control of it and they're doing something about it.
So, talk about doing something about it. What is the one thing that you wish you knew about credit when you were younger and that you can share with others to maybe help them out so that they can do better than you did?
Yeah, when I was younger, the one thing I thought that was that credit was free, which of course it wasn't. It
But you know
isn't.
what? A lot of young people think that right now. They think that if they put it on their credit card, they don't have to make any payments. And nobody thinks about compounded interest.
Exactly. And you know what? I wish I had known. I mean, what I know now, and I would have been a lot wiser with credit. But one of the things that I also think about, I wish I had known, was that, again, what you just said, it's compound interest, right? We don't really think about it and how much it adds up. So paying off the debt as soon as possible makes way more sense than carrying it out as long as possible and just making that minimum payment. The when you are able to pay off your debt all at once, you're actually using the credit card. But if you're making those payments on a monthly basis and stretching out the payments, the credit card's using you. So you got to really think about it from that perspective.
That's a really good way of putting it. The credit card is using you. So when you're being used by your credit card, Can you ever get credit again if you decide to file for consumer proposal or any other debt repayment program?
Yes, you know what? We have a great program. We know that for a fact that most of our clients say, can I get credit again? And we normally say, we're allowed to explain to our clients that as soon as they go through a consumer proposal, they're allowed to reestablish their credit rating. And you don't necessarily have to get a secured credit card. You can start paying your rent on time. You can start with a car loan. You can start with an RSP loan. And all those things will help you rebuild your credit. But a lot of people just think, oh, I just, have to rebuild my credit with a credit card. Not necessarily, but it is still possible. There's a lot of companies out there that will help you and provide you with a secured credit card.
So, Elena, 10, 15 seconds left. Tell us about your relationship with your credit.
I have a love relationship with my credit. I use it when I absolutely need to use it, and I pay it off as soon as I can.
And I think that's the key. I think the key is, my father always said to me, if you can't afford it, don't buy it. Cash is king. And if you do put it on your credit card, the rule of thumb is you pay it off at the end of the month. You never carry forward whatever debt that you have.
So true. That's the best advice your dad could give to all of us here.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Elena.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
It's important to remember a few reasons why you want to keep a good credit score. You will have significant savings on interest rates for big ticket purchases, which means better loan products and terms. You'll have access to the better credit cards. You'll have insurance discounts, and you'll have more housing options. So with a good credit score, you'll be able to save money on your interest payments, and you can use the savings to pay down your debt and save for your emergency fund or invest in your future. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski, and I'm here to empower you and make frugality fashionable. Bye for now.